Hi everyone, welcome to eLearnChat, where talk, it's knowledge. And I'm joined today by a good friend down in the UK area. It is Lesley Price. Hi Lesley, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Oh my goodness, it is so hot in the UK at the moment.
Same here.
But I was in London today, 35 degrees.
Yeah, that's about like us right now. Hot. Hot.
But that is unusual for the UK.
Is it really? Oh, you're cooler. That's true. Well, anyway, next week we're going to have Lesley all to ourselves. She's going to be talking about Learn Appeal and all the stuff she's doing. So we'll look forward to that. And today we've got a real special guest. We've tried to get her on before. We've had some scheduling conflicts, and which happens. She's coming in from the land down under. Her name, Helen Blunden. She'll be right with us right after the intro. Here we go. And there she is. Hi, Helen. How are you?
Good, thank you. Rick, how are you? I'm concerned that it's so hot where you are, because look at me. I'm all rubbed up.
Well, it's your winter. It's yeah.
That's right. It's not so cold in other places around the world, but today is going to be a warm day for us with 18 degrees now.
That's not too bad.
I'm not too sure.
Yeah, that's not too bad. So I'm glad you could join us. It's always hard scheduling people in Australia because we all forget it's a day later for you. You're actually in Friday, and for us it's Thursday, and it's just a common one. People get that mixed up all the time, and so when we schedule things out, we always want to make sure it's Outlook is supposed to handle it, but it doesn't always handle it well. But here we are. We're glad you could make it, and you've been very busy on your internet blog, on YouTube. You've always got lots of content out there, and you've got some really funny content too. I always tell people, you don't know Helen, you've got to watch her podcasts. They're funny. You did one on LMSs, which I thought was absolutely hilarious.
Yes, that was some years ago.
It was. And see, but I remember it still. See, that's retention. It worked.
That's true. Well, thank you so much for the kind invitation to come on your show, Rick. I'm really looking forward to it.
Oh, great. And you and Lesley are friends. You guys know each other.
Yes. I first met Lesley online through Twitter, like I did many of my personal learning network. But I had a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to meet Lesley in person when we visited the UK with my husband. I think about, was it 4 years ago now? Like time flies. And Lesley organised a wonderful meetup with UK London-based L&D people, and I got just a chance to meet them all. So it's just a memorable event that I keep referring to with many of my peers, saying, if you ever get to have an opportunity to meet your personal learning network in person, go and meet them. So yeah, I've known Lesley for some years. That's great.
Now, Helen, you've got something which I really like watching in you, because you're very natural and you've got a wicked sense of humor, and you have no problem showing it, which I think is hilarious, and that makes you probably a very good writer. I'm assuming. I haven't read anything you've written, but I am sure you're a very good writer. Your sense of humor.
But you're calling her Helen. She's not.
What did I say?
She's got her alter ego.
Ah, okay.
I'm sorry, Rick. Aren't you Shazza?
Shazza.
Okay, look, Rick, I'll tell you the story there. I hate public speaking. I'm always fearful of getting up and speaking in front of people, and I try to avoid it at all costs. And some years ago, I thought to myself, if I need to develop myself in this area, I need to be comfortable in being able to speak publicly. And I thought to myself, if I could do it on video to a camera, I could then get that feedback from me and improve. Okay, sure, it might not have been the best way to develop public speaking. I should have actually been talking to a group of people in real life, but the camera to me was just something simple and easy I could do. So I started creating little videos and talking through them, and I must admit Snapchat was a wonderful medium for me, because within 24 hours the stuff would disappear anyway, and I could still get that feedback. So what I did was I used video as my development platform to be able to present what I wanted to say and articulate a message around the topics or the areas that I want to talk to people about. But as I was doing it, I was also watching a lot of others on video and improving and really picking up on their mannerisms and their techniques, and then just kind of honing that. And I think the humour element must have always been there, because I've always loved comedy. I've always loved writing. I've always loved being and getting involved in all sorts of different things. So the video started to be the expression of that. I just couldn't use it in a professional context, because I felt that online you have to represent a certain personality or a certain persona, and I was just mindful in the early years of how that might present across to L&D. So in the recent years, I've basically been a bit freer with my identity, and I just kind of let my personality shine through in whatever I do and whatever happens. If people are offended by it, then so be it. If they're enjoying it, so be it. I'm glad. So that's the story of how I got into video.
That's great. That's absolutely great. And never worry about what L&D thinks, ever.
Well, Rick, when we actually met at when Helen and I met, I booked a table in London at a really nice place in London, in Covent Garden. I booked a table for about, 12, 18 people, and the table was booked under Activate Learn. And Helen just absolutely giggled. She just said, my goodness, Lesley has actually booked our table under my Twitter name. How could she do that? And I said, because that's how in the UK, because you live in Australia and people in the UK can see your videos and see your tweets, they knew you not so much as Helen Blunden. I knew you as Helen Blunden, but they knew you as Activate Learn.
Yep.
And I just love that name. Activate Learn. What does it say?
Well, yeah, and actually there's a story there of how I came up with the name Activate Learn, because at the time, this was, I've lost track, so many years ago, I was working for a bank, and I was involved in designing and developing an induction program. And I had to come up with the name of the induction program, and at the time someone mentioned we should call it Activate Induct, because you're really activating people into the organisation. And instantly I thought, I like that name, I'm going to use it for myself. And what they didn't know is, while I was working at the bank on the induction program, designing and developing that, at the same time I had gotten online on the Australian Business Register and had registered my own business name under Activate Learning Solutions, because I thought one day, somewhere, somehow, I'm going to become my own independent consultant. I'll need a name, and I really love Activate because it denoted power, it denoted action, it denoted something, and it started with A, which I loved. So yeah, that was how I came up with Activate Learning Solutions, and my Twitter handle is Activate Learn, because I saw myself as giving the skills for people to activate the way they work, learn and connect using different social media and social networks for their work.
Now, how did you wind up getting into the L&D field?
Well, there's a story there too. Many years ago, I was at university and I had to register. I was going through university orientation week, and there was a long queue for CSIRO, which is a science organisation, and all the employers, a lot of employers and businesses had come to the university to try and get graduates and people interested in doing different courses relevant to their businesses. So there was this long queue for the science table, and there was no one right next to this guy in a sailor's suit. He was a sailor from the Royal Australian Navy, and I couldn't be bothered queuing up for the science, so I went and spoke to this sailor, and he said to me, the Royal Australian Navy will pay your way through university, and at the end of it you get a job. And it sounded too good, and I joined up the Navy. So the Navy sponsored my way through university, and at the end of university I joined the Navy as what was known as a training officer, which is effectively learning and development, and spent about 11 years in the full-time Navy, acting in all sorts of different L&D type roles. But in the Navy, their focus is very much on performance consulting, understanding the workplace, and then looking at particular solutions to close performance gaps, and training just happens to be one of many solutions. So I got my foundation of performance consulting in the Navy. But after the Navy, I went into the corporate world and have done all sorts of different roles involved in L&D, everything from managing LMSs, managing teams. I've done heaps of instructional design of face-to-face courses, online courses, blended courses, in later years, social learning communities, working with and using enterprise social networks. But there was also an element. I had two lives. I had my 9-to-5 life in L&D, but then I had this other life. I was also in the Royal Australian Navy Reserves. I did a lot of part-time weekend work with the Naval Reserves, and what I was doing there was public relations, corporate communications. So all the skills of the writing, business comms, even video. I managed to pick those up in working as a Navy reservist in PR and corporate comms.
That's great.
So, yeah, I think that's actually a really important thing that you're saying there, Helen, because one of the things that I believe that learning and development people have to learn is the importance of communications. And I don't just mean communications with learning, I mean communications with the senior management team, the C-suite, as you know, they're called in the US, SMT as they're called in the UK, but also marketing. I think that L&D and marketing have an awful lot to learn from each other, and you're one of the people that I know totally agrees with me on this.
Very much so. It's effectively a no-brainer, and I know that learning and development people will not have an issue with picking up the skills of marketing, simply because they know how to use the tools and the platforms. Where they might need skills is then structuring the message, and how to communicate that message to an alternative audience that is not just internal people, but to sell the story to an external audience of some sort, or to other parts of the business. So yeah, I'm actually quite glad, thinking back and in hindsight, the work that I did in Navy Reserve, public relations and corporate communications has been instrumental for me to be able to express and understand and see different ways of looking at learning, and then being able to see how I could communicate that to completely different audiences.
But you use the word selling, and I think that word has a big problem in learning and development, because learning people don't think about selling, and selling people don't think about learning.
True.
No, I disagree with you there, Lesley, because selling people do a ton of coaching. They get motivated. They do a lot of learning. They usually learn how to sell, and that's a big industry.
They don't talk about it as
no, they
being
don't talk about
learning.
it not in terms of like traditional learning.
They don't talk about it as being learning.
No.
And learning people don't like to think what they are doing is actually in any way related to selling, because oh no, we don't sell things, we're learning, we're more important.
And this has been my difficulty, because selling has this negative connotation, but in effect it's what we're all somehow doing. We're somehow influencing, we're somehow role modeling, we're not. It's been very interesting. Rick, just so you know, I'm working on a sideline fun project at the moment. I'll give you how I explain this. And this fun project is creating a fake news channel that we've created on Snapchat, and it's headed by, and the idea came from a guy named Cameron Murray, who's based in Glasgow. Now, his idea was
another Scotsman, eh? we're all as mad as each other.
Hilarious. But get this, he had this idea of creating a fake news channel and encouraging people from all around the world who have never met each other to submit news stories that he pulls together and he edits into a weekly 30-plus minute show that attracts a lot of people who are interested, and they love the show and they love the concept. And so some people have asked me, why am I involved in something like this? Because it has nothing to do with learning and development. And in my head, I said, it's got everything to do with learning and development, because this particular project has stretched me to understand how to use different social media and social platforms to create interesting and engaging content. It's helped me collaborate with a virtual and a very remote team, and we have challenges of being able to connect with each other because of different time zones and different restrictions. We have to put together a 30-minute show every week. We have to find our stories, we have to script our stories, we have to film our stories, and then they all get edited. We have to create the storyline, so we have to manage our time. So in effect, working on this very global collaborative project with my peers who I haven't met, all the skills that I'm learning in there have direct application to how we work in a workplace where we've got these constraints of time, we've got constraints of technology, we've got constraints of geographical locations. So in one way, the way I explain it is, if people can learn from an experience or a project that might not initially look like an L&D or a learning type experience, if they could sit and think and reflect, what is it that they're learning through this experience? What kind of knowledge and skills and capabilities are they gaining through it? And then how can they apply these very things back into their own work? Then I see that as just as an important experience for my personal learning and my professional learning and development. Just because it's a funny show, it's irrelevant. It's what I'm learning from it and what I can apply in my own work, which is the important thing.
it makes complete and utter sense to me, Helen. So the next question is, I know that you're going to be taking on a new role.
Yes.
So come on, tell us.
I'm quite excited by this. Look, I'm still fairly new. I'm in my second week. I work now on a part-time basis for a small company called Adopt and Embrace. And don't you love the name? I love the name, Adopt and Embrace. And what they do is they help organisations and employees of organisations adopt and embrace Office 365 and Microsoft products. So my role as an adoption consultant is I go into a business like some kind of crack team, and I look at their business processes, and I ask them questions about what they're doing and how they're doing business processes, and then I help support them to look at and implement how to do those processes more efficiently using Office 365 and the Microsoft products that they've already got. So in a way, this was, I'm loving the role simply because always from the start, I always used to say, you know, we have got the tools and technology, we have already got what we have inside the organisation, and that is the people. The people somewhere, somehow, have got the knowledge, the skills, the capabilities to be able to solve the business problems. We just don't know where they happen to be, but they're out there somewhere. And we also have you know, I'm not one to always go out and buy new tech just for the sake of it. I would much rather have an organisation see what they've already got and then be able to use that more effectively to solve problems. So it's so lovely to be able to help and coach people see the value of what they already have in front of them. You know, what I've noticed is they may not be aware that you know, much of the technology that they have is collaborative, can be shared, is, you know, people can actually edit and do their work on shared documents, so they minimise the time it requires to redo work. So now it's more like helping people understand the power of what they have in front of them, but looking at it in, you know, during their workday, what can they do to streamline their processes that they do every day, but in using Office 365.
Oh my God, that takes me back to years and years and years ago when I worked for UK government, and never mind Office 365. SharePoint had literally not long been invented, and I am still very, very, very good friends with a guy that I worked with back in in Becta in the olden days. Maybe I'll need to persuade you to get him on board, Rick, and do a chat, because this friend of mine has been doing this stuff now. I say, when I met him, you know, he was brand new to it. He was thinking outside the box, and he's now worked for very large companies, but helping them use the tools that they actually have in the organisation. So not bringing in new tools. Oh, what have you got, and are you using it properly?
Exactly.
And that seems to me what you're saying, Helen. Am I right?
It's exactly right. You know, a lot of organisations are going through big Office 365 and Microsoft implementations, but our company deals with the people side. So we don't deal with the technical implementation. We deal with the people side. So we do a lot of coaching, a lot of supporting, also a lot of ways of looking at how they could effectively use these tools for knowledge sharing, workplace collaboration, productivity. A lot of the work involves managing change and supporting people through this change. And it's a lot of fun because it's actually pulls together now a lot of the stuff that I was talking about in social learning, and being able to work in communities, to be able to identify and build, networks, and also share knowledge, working out loud, showing and sharing your work, things like that. It's pulling it together now, but now I finally have some kind of platform. Yes, it's around Microsoft, but that's okay. That's okay for me, because everything, all the stuff that I've been talking about these last few years around the behaviours of showing and sharing our work, of social learning, of collaboration, now has a mechanism or a platform that I could use to explain to people. Because I must admit, sometimes it's very hard to explain all this using external social media and talking about Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat, because a lot of people don't simply make that connection of these tools being able to do all that as well. But if you talk about Microsoft, which is what they use every day at work, and everyone has used a Microsoft product somewhere, somehow, then that I find now has been a lot easier for me to explain the message of what I've been talking about all these last few years.
It's just all you're doing is talking about joining the dots.
Yes, yes.
To me, it's, and I think, Rick, you'll actually agree on that. It's joining, and it doesn't matter if it's Microsoft or not, you're joining dots. And that's, you know, at the end of the day, here is us on eLearnChat, and what we're trying to do is join dots.
Yeah. I like that explanation, yeah. Yes, it's exactly that. And you see it, you know you're on the right track when people say to you, I mean, my measure of success is when someone says, oh, I had no idea about that. Now I get it. So if they can say that, I know my job's done.
Well, Helen, you mentioned something about change and change management. That's an area traditionally that L&D has been awful at. Change management and getting people to understand that things are changing, which happens a lot because there's always new initiatives going out there, new training has to go out there, like you said, new dots being connected. But change management is a tough one for a lot of departments, but for L&D it seems, at least to me, pretty hard, pretty difficult, because it's not something they're used to. What do you think?
I agree with that, and I would also say that I would not be surprised if many L&D people have already worked with change managers. I mean, there's a whole level of discussion here about whether we should have change separated from learning, separated from marketing, separated. So let's leave that discussion aside. But in my role as in L&D, whenever I was on big projects, I was always working quite closely with the change team anyway. So I wouldn't be surprised if L&D are working quite closely with change people. But yes, it's definitely something that we must be incorporating in our communications and understanding, kind of like the behaviours and the mindsets of the people who are going through this change, but also being able to work with senior leaders to understand how to basically communicate that message to them. Sorry,
I actually agree with you there, Rick. I've always been involved in change and change management, but in order to get credibility, probably because of the learning background I have and everything else, I actually did a qualification in change management. I wouldn't recommend it for everybody. I don't think it's necessary for everybody, but in the role that I was in, where I was in quite a senior role working with government organizations, people were looking to me and saying, oh, and what gives you, what gives you the cue? How do you know how to do it? So I actually went and did, you know, a qualification in it. But what the qualification was about, I have no idea. Yeah, I've got, you know, I could have more letters after my name if I chose to use them. But the skills that I learned were actually incredibly useful.
I believe it. Now, when they asked you, you know, what gives you the right to talk about this, you could say, I have a cat suit.
Oh, that's just because. Oh,
and that
Helen,
ends it right there.
What you have to understand is one day, Rick is going to expect me
to wear a
to
cat
stand
suit.
up.
That's right.
Wearing the black Emma Peel cat suit.
That's right.
I think, though, going back to your question, Rick, I think one of the skills that L&D need to at least take on board is feel comfortable playing in the space between change, between learning, between marketing, between communications. Because, like, for me now, I don't identify myself as a full L&D person. I just don't see myself like that anymore. Simply because I can't keep up with the pace of change. I can't be an expert in anything anymore. But I have a bit of experience in marketing. I've got a bit of experience in PR. I've got a bit of experience in skills in all sorts of things. So I actually quite like being uncomfortable in the white space between all those elements. And I think what that allows me to do is then, like Lesley said, connect the dots between the departments. So if something comes up and something is mentioned, I could say, hey, let's speak to so-and-so because I heard that they're doing something there, or let's speak to such and such because they're doing work in this space which is feeding into other areas. So you basically see the connections and the networks that are happening. And I think L&D have to get comfortable in playing in that white space, which means getting out of the L&D environment where just being around their own peers or being around people and talking just about L&D stuff, and getting out into the business, getting out into completely different fields, industries, and then trying to be able to connect the dots and see relationships and networks and how they work, and then bringing that back into their own work. It doesn't mean that they're an expert in it. They don't have to be an expert, but they just have to be really good at asking questions, being curious, having a bit of fun about it, and reflecting on what they're learning, and then how can they bring those back, as well as building relationships and building networks, which is huge.
That's great. I totally agree with you.
There is nothing wrong with being a jack of all trades and master of none, or being a chief cook and bottle washer.
Yeah.
Exactly. Nothing wrong with it.
No.
In fact, it's a lot of fun.
And with that, we are, and guess what? We are at the end of our time, and I think good food for thought. I think we need to pursue this one a little bit more. We really haven't talked about change management at all on the show. And I like the way Helen says it, that space between things.
Yeah.
It's a good place to be, because we are between so many different things. So food for thought. Next time you come on, we'll pursue this a little bit further, because I think that you're touching on a lot of subjects which are very relevant to what we're all going through right now. So
thank you, Rick, and thanks, Lesley.
No problem, my lovely. It was great to chat to you. I'm just so sorry I didn't get to see you.
And for you folks watching the show, please give us your feedback, subscribe, and let us know what you think. And we will have show notes with Helen's contact information, so you can get a hold of her on Twitter or Facebook or wherever you guys want to get a hold of each other. Anyway, well, Helen, appreciate you coming on, and we will see you next time, and we'll see you folks next week. Have a good one, everyone.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Bye.
Bye.